They say justice is
Let me
blind,
go!
but in Judge Frederick Blackwell's courtroom, she wasn't just blind. She was gagged, bound, and thrown out the back door. Everyone in Clearwater Valley knew the unwritten rule. If you were wealthy and well-connected, you got a pass. But if you looked like Evelyn, you were guilty until proven broke. When Judge Blackwell saw an older black woman in a faded hoodie standing before his bench, he didn't see a formidable legal mind. He saw a punchline. He laughed in her face. He mocked her voice. He thought he was the king of his little castle. But he had no idea that the woman he was trying to humiliate wasn't just a defendant.
Grandma.
She was his boss's boss. And she wasn't there to plead for mercy. She was there to deliver a verdict he would never forget. The air conditioning in the Clearwater Valley County Courthouse had been broken since 2001. Or at least that's what it felt like. The air was thick, smelling of floor wax, stale coffee, and the nervous sweat of people who knew their lives were about to change for the worse. Evelyn Montgomery sat in the back row of courtroom 6C, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was 64 years old, with skin the color of deep mahogany and graying hair pulled back into a simple no-nonsense bun. Today she wasn't wearing the heavy silken black robes that usually drape her shoulders in Washington, D.C. Today she wore a pair of gray sweatpants, comfortable sneakers, and a slightly oversized navy blue hoodie that said Ocean City in cracking white letters. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. She looked to the untrained eye like someone who had given up. But Evelyn's eyes were sharp. They darted around the room, cataloging everything. She watched the bailiff, a heavy-set man named Rodriguez, scrolling on his phone while a young man tried to ask him where to stand. She watched the court clerk Patricia rolling her eyes as she shuffled files, treating the paperwork of human lives like junk mail, and mostly she watched the man on the bench, Judge Frederick Blackwell. He was a local legend, but not for the right reasons. He was a man of about 52 with a flushed, ruddy complexion and thinning blonde hair slicked back with too much gel. He didn't sit in his chair. He lounged, leaning back as if the courtroom were his personal living room, and the defendants were unwanted guests interrupting his football game. Evelyn had heard the rumors about Blackwell for years. She had family in Clearwater Valley. Her niece Carmen lived just 3 streets over from the courthouse. Carmen had called Evelyn in tears 3 weeks ago. "Auntie," Carmen had sobbed. He didn't even listen. He just looked at Terrence, saw his tattoos, and gave him the maximum sentence for a first-time noise complaint. He called him a thug on the record. It's not right. Evelyn had listened, her heart tightening. She knew the statistics. She knew the reality of the justice system better than almost anyone alive, but hearing it happen to her own blood in the town where she'd been born struck a different chord. It wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. So Evelyn had taken a leave of absence. She told her clerks she was going on a fishing trip. She didn't tell them she was going fishing for a shark. If you're hooked on this story already, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories. Asterisk, asterisk, next, Judge Blackwell bellowed, banging his gavel, not for order but for effect. A young woman stepped up, trembling. She was there for an unpaid parking ticket. She tried to explain that she had been in the hospital when the ticket was issued. "I don't care about your medical history, Miss Rivera," Blackwell cut her off, his voice dripping with bored arrogance. "I care about the city's revenue. Double the fine. Payment plan denied. Next." The girl burst into tears, but Bailiff Rodriguez just steered her away by the elbow. Evelyn's jaw set. She felt that familiar burn in her chest, the cold fire that had driven her through law school, through the endless nights of study, through the skepticism of professors who told her she'd be better suited as a paralegal. She reached into her canvas tote bag and touched the file inside. It wasn't a case file. It was a property deed. Today, she wasn't Justice Montgomery. Today, she was just Evelyn. She had orchestrated a minor property dispute regarding her late mother's shed, a trivial matter that required a hearing. She had intentionally filed the paperwork with errors, intentionally dressed down, intentionally made herself look like the kind of person Frederick Blackwell loved to eat for breakfast. Case number 6847. The clerk droned. City versus Evelyn Montgomery. Zoning violation and failure to maintain property structure. Evelyn stood up. Her knees popped slightly. Age was a real thing, even for Supreme Court justices, and she walked slowly to the defendant's table. She didn't look at the floor. She looked right at Blackwell. He was looking at his watch. "State your name," he muttered, not looking up. "Evelyn Montgomery," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and clear. It was a voice that had silenced Senate hearings. But in this acoustic nightmare of a room, it sounded soft. Blackwell finally looked up. He squinted, his eyes raking over her hoodie, her sweatpants, her empty hands. A smirk curled the corner of his lip. "Miss Montgomery," he said, leaning into his microphone so his voice boomed through the room. "You are aware this is a court of law, not a Walmart checkout line. We have a dress code." The bailiff snickered. A few lawyers in the front row, regulars who depended on Blackwell's good side, chuckled politely. Evelyn didn't flinch. "I apologize, Your Honor. My luggage was lost in transit. I thought it more important to be here on time than to be fashionable." "Lost in transit," Blackwell repeated, mocking her tone. "Fancy way of saying you missed the bus. Look, let's make this quick. You have a shed on Maple Street. That's an eyesore. The city wants it down. You haven't responded to 3 letters. Why?" "I never received the letters, Your Honor." Evelyn lied smoothly. This was part of the test. The address on file is for property itself, which is uninhabited. Proper procedure dictates notice must be sent to the owner's primary residence. Blackwell paused. He blinked. For a second, the legal jargon registered, but then his ego took the wheel. He didn't like being corrected on procedure by a woman in an Ocean City hoodie. "Don't quote the law to me, Ms. Montgomery," Blackwell sneered. "I am the law in this room. You ignored the city. You're wasting my time. I am simply stating my rights to due process under the bang." The gavel hit the wood so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Silence," Blackwell roared. His face turned a deeper shade of red. "You want to play lawyer? Go to law school. Until then, shut your mouth. I'm fining you $500 for the structure and another $500 for wasting the court's time with your attitude." Evelyn stood very still. This was it. The trap was set. "With all due respect," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the steel blade she was known for. "You cannot impose a punitive fine for a civil zoning infraction without an evidentiary hearing. That is a violation of the 14th Amendment." The courtroom went dead silent. The lawyers in the front row stopped chuckling. They turned around, looking at the old woman in the hoodie with sudden confusion. That wasn't how people in sweatpants usually spoke. Blackwell looked stunned for a split second, but then his arrogance doubled down. He laughed. It was a loud, barking, ugly sound. "The 14th Amendment," Blackwell laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, that is rich. Listen to her. She's been watching too much TV. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. In Clearwater Valley, the Constitution is what I say it is. Now, get out of my face before I hold you in contempt and throw you in a cell for the weekend." Evelyn didn't move. "Is that a threat, Judge Blackwell?" "It's a promise," he spat. "Bailiff, remove this woman. And Rodriguez, check her for warrants. Usually when they talk this much, they're hiding something." Rodriguez, the bailiff, lumbered forward, grabbing Evelyn's arm with a grip that was far too tight. "Come on, lady," Rodriguez grunted. "Let's go." Evelyn pulled her arm back with surprising strength. She fixed Rodriguez with a look that could have frozen water. "Do not touch me." Then she turned back to Blackwell. "You have made a grave error today, Frederick," she said. She dropped the "Your Honor." Blackwell stood up, his veins bulging in his neck. "That's it. 30 days. Contempt of court. Lock her up. Get her out of my sight. Don't go anywhere. This story is about to take an incredible turn. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next." Asterisk, asterisk, as Rodriguez grabbed her again, dragging her toward the holding cells, Evelyn didn't struggle. She didn't scream. She simply maintained eye contact with the judge, her face an unreadable mask of calm. She allowed herself to be led away. She allowed the heavy metal door to slam shut behind her. She allowed them to take her fingerprints. Blackwell thought he had just crushed another bug. He didn't know he had just swallowed poison. The holding cell in the basement of the courthouse was worse than the courtroom. It smelled of mildew and unwashed bodies. There was a single metal bench bolted to the wall, and a toilet in the corner that looked like a health hazard. Evelyn sat on the bench, keeping her back straight. They had taken her phone. They had taken her tote bag. But they hadn't taken her mind. There were 2 other women in the cell. One was a young girl, maybe 20, with smear mascara running down her cheeks. The other was a tough-looking woman in her 40s, with a bruise on her jaw. The tough woman looked at Evelyn. "What you in for, Mama?" "Shoplifting," Evelyn said, smoothing the fabric of her sweatpants. "Contempt of court." The woman whistled. "You mouthed off to Blackwell. You got a death wish?" "That man is the devil. He put my brother away for 5 years for having a joint in his pocket. He is a tyrant," Evelyn agreed quietly. "But tyrants always have a weakness." "Yeah, what's his?" the woman asked. "He thinks he's untouchable," Evelyn said. "Arrogance is a slow-acting venom. You don't feel it until you're already dead." The young girl sniffled. "I'm scared. I didn't have the money for the bail. I'm going to lose my job at the bakery." Evelyn turned to her. Her expression softened. "What is your name, child?" "Sarah," the girl whispered. "Sarah, listen to me," Evelyn said, her voice carrying that maternal authority that made people listen. "You are not going to lose your job. When I get out of here, I'm going to make a phone call." The tough woman laughed harshly. "When you get out, Mama, you got 30 days. By the time you get out, Blackwell will have forgotten you even exist." Evelyn smiled. It was a small, terrifying smile. "He won't forget," Evelyn said. "I'm going to make sure he remembers my name for the rest of his miserable life." Meanwhile, upstairs, Judge Blackwell was having lunch in his chambers. He was eating a messy meatball sub, getting marinara sauce on his robe. He was laughing with a local defense attorney, a slimy man named Douglas Winters. "Did you see her?" Blackwell chuckled, his mouth full, quoting the 14th Amendment. "Who does she think she is? I swear these people watch one episode of Law and Order and think they're Thurgood Marshall." Winters laughed nervously. "She did speak well, though, Fred. Did you notice her diction? It was educated." "Educated?" Blackwell scoffed. "Please. She's probably a retired school librarian who got bitter. She's nobody, just another nuisance in my court." "You gave her 30 days, Fred, for a zoning hearing. Isn't that a bit steep?" Blackwell wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "It's about respect, Douglas. You let one of them talk back, they all start doing it. I have to maintain order. Besides, who's she going to call? The ACLU? They don't come down to Clearwater Valley." Just then, the door to the chambers opened. It was Patricia the clerk. She looked pale, like sheet white pale. "Judge," she stammered. "What is it, Patricia?" "I'm eating." There's a phone call for you. Line 1. "Take a message." Blackwell waved a hand. I can't, Judge." Patricia's hands were shaking. "It's a governor's office, and someone from the Department of Justice is on the other line." Blackwell froze. The meatball sub hovered halfway to his mouth. "The governor?" he frowned. "What for?" "Probably that ribbon-cutting ceremony next month." "No, sir," Patricia whispered. "They're asking about a prisoner, specifically the woman you just held in contempt, Miss Montgomery." Blackwell felt a tiny prick of unease in his gut. Just a small one. Montgomery? Why would the governor care about a zoning violator? "I don't know, sir, but the man from the DOJ, he didn't call her Miss Montgomery." Blackwell dropped the sub on his plate. "What did he call her?" Patricia swallowed hard. "He called her Justice Montgomery. This is where everything changes. If you're loving the story of ultimate justice, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to see this." Asterisk, the room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. A fly buzzed against the window pane. "Justice." Blackwell repeated the word, but it felt heavy on his tongue like lead. "Justice Montgomery." He tried to search his memory. Montgomery. He knew the name. Where did he know the name from? He turned to his computer and typed in Evelyn Montgomery into the search bar. The first image that popped up was a formal portrait, a woman in black robes standing next to the President of the United States. She looked regal, stern, powerful, and she looked exactly like the woman in the Ocean City hoodie he had just thrown in a cage. Justice Evelyn Montgomery, the third black woman appointed to the Supreme Court, known for her harsh stance on judicial misconduct and civil rights violations. The blood drained from Judge Blackwell's face so fast he nearly fainted. Douglas Winters stood up and backed away. I think I should go, Fred. Sit down, Blackwell hissed. He looked at the screen, then at the door. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. It's a mistake, he whispered. It has to be. Why would a Supreme Court justice be in my court wearing sweatpants? But deep down he knew. He remembered her eyes. He remembered the way she stood. He remembered you have made a grave error. Patricia, Blackwell croaked. Get Rodriguez. Tell him to bring her up now, immediately, and bring her to my chambers. Not the courtroom. My chambers. Yes, Judge. Patricia ran out. Blackwell stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He looked at his robe. There was a stain. He frantically tried to rub it out, but he only smeared the red sauce further. He looked like a butcher. Down in the cell, the heavy door clanked open. Rodriguez appeared. He wasn't swaggering this time. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He was holding Evelyn's tote bag with two hands, like it was a holy relic. Ms. Montgomery. Rodriguez's voice cracked. Evelyn looked up slowly. She didn't stand immediately. She let him wait. Yes, Deputy Rodriguez. The judge would like to see you in his chambers. Evelyn stood up. She smoothed her hoodie. She looked at the young girl, Sarah. Don't worry, Sarah, Evelyn said. I haven't forgotten. She walked to the cell door. Rodriguez stepped aside, pressing his back against the wall to give her as much space as possible. Do you want your bag, ma'am? Rodriguez offered, trembling. Keep it, Evelyn said coldly. I want my hands free. She walked out of the cell, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. She wasn't walking to a meeting. She was walking to an execution. And Judge Blackwell was the one on the block. The walk from the basement holding cells to the judge's chambers on the third floor usually took 5 minutes. For Bailiff Rodriguez, walking half a step behind Evelyn, it felt like a death march that lasted a century. He didn't dare speak. He didn't dare breathe too loudly. The air around this woman had changed. Down in the cell, she had just been another defiant defendant. Now in the elevator, she radiated a terrifying silent power that made the fluorescent lights seem to dim in reverence. When the elevator chimed, Rodriguez practically scrambled to open the door for her. Right this way, ma'am. Justice. Ma'am, Rodriguez stammered, sweating through his uniform. They reached the heavy oak door of Chamber 6. Rodriguez knocked once timidly, then pushed it open. Judge Frederick Blackwell was standing in the middle of the room. He had taken off his stained robe. He had combed his hair. He was holding a bottle of sparkling water in one hand and a glass in the other, his hand shaking so badly the glass clinked rhythmically against the bottle. Leave us, Blackwell ordered Rodriguez, his voice tight and high-pitched. Rodriguez fled. He didn't walk. He evaporated, closing the door with a soft click. Evelyn stood near the entrance. She didn't move further into the room. She simply looked at him. She looked at the expensive mahogany desk, the framed degrees on the wall, the golf trophies on the shelf, and finally at the man who was currently vibrating with terror. Justice Montgomery, Blackwell began, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. I simply cannot apologize enough. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. If you had known I was a Supreme Court justice, Evelyn finished for him, her voice cool and dry, you would have treated me with respect. Is that it? Well, yes. I mean, of course, professional courtesy. But because you thought I was just Evelyn from Maple Street, she stepped forward, because you thought I was a retired nobody with a zoning violation, you treated me like cattle. Blackwell swallowed. He set the water down, because he was about to drop it. Now, Justice, let's not be dramatic. I run a tight ship. We get a lot of riffraff in here. Sometimes patience wears thin. It's a stressful job. You know that better than anyone. Do not presume to know what I know, Evelyn said. She didn't raise her voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I sat on the bench for the Southern District of New York for 17 years. I have presided over terrorism trials, organized crime RICO cases, and billion-dollar corporate fraud. I have never, not once, denied a citizen their right to be heard. I have never laughed at a defendant. She walked over to the leather guest chairs opposite his desk. She didn't sit. She gripped the back of the chair, her knuckles dark against the leather. Do you know why I'm here, Frederick? The shed, he tried weakly. There is no shed, Evelyn said. My mother's property on Maple Street was demolished 6 years ago. It's an empty lot. If you had read the file, if you had even glanced at the photos provided by the city inspector, you would have seen that. But you didn't look. You saw a black woman in a hoodie, and you stopped thinking. Blackwell paled. I can dismiss the case right now. Expunge the record. It'll be like it never happened. Oh, it happened, Evelyn said. And it has been happening for a long time. I didn't come here for a zoning violation. I came here for Terrence. Blackwell blinked. Terrence Williams. My nephew. The realization hit Blackwell like a physical blow. He staggered back against his desk. He remembered the kid. Tattoos, baggy jeans, noise complaint. Blackwell had thrown the book at him just to make a point to the gallery. I didn't know he was related to you. That is the problem. Evelyn slammed her hand down on the chair, the sound cracking like a whip. It shouldn't matter. Justice isn't about who you know. It isn't about bloodlines or connections. It is about the law. And you, Frederick Blackwell, have turned this courthouse into your own personal kingdom where you tax the poor to feed your ego. She reached into her hoodie pocket. For a second, Blackwell flinched, terrified she had a weapon. She pulled out a small black digital voice recorder. The red light was blinking. I have been recording since I walked to the metal detectors, Evelyn said. I have you on tape mocking my appearance. I have you refusing to look at evidence. I have you issuing a punitive fine without a hearing, and I have you admitting that the Constitution doesn't apply in your courtroom. Blackwell stared at the recorder. His career was flashing before his eyes. The country club membership, the summer house, the power. You can't use that, he whispered. Two-party consent state. Actually, Evelyn smiled. This state has a public official exception regarding duties performed in a public office. But even if I couldn't use it in court, imagine what this recorder will sound like on the 6 p.m. news. Imagine what the State Judicial Conduct Commission will think. Blackwell rounded the desk. He was desperate now. He looked sweaty and dangerous. Give me the recorder, Evelyn. Let's work this out. I have friends, powerful friends. The mayor owes me. The police chief owes me. Sit down, Evelyn commanded. No, you listen to me. Blackwell pointed a shaking finger at her. You think you can come into my town and entrap me? I'm the victim here. You lied. You committed perjury by creating a fake dispute. I committed a sting operation, Evelyn corrected. And as for your friends, the mayor and the police chief, she glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. It is 1:15 p.m. Right about now. Special Agent Thomas Hartley of the FBI is walking into the mayor's office with a subpoena for his financial records regarding construction contracts for the new jail. And I believe the state police are currently executing a search warrant on your home computer. Blackwell fell into his chair. His legs simply gave out. My home. You didn't think I came alone, did you? Evelyn's voice softened, but it wasn't out of kindness. It was a soft voice a doctor uses when telling a patient the disease is terminal. I have been building this dossier for 8 months. The kickbacks from the private probation company. We know the arrangement with Winters to funnel wealthy clients to his firm for lighter sentences. We know the excessive sentencing of minorities to fuel the county's prison labor contract. We know it all. Frederick Blackwell put his head in his hands. He began to sob. It was a pathetic, gasping sound. Please, he begged. I have a family. My daughter is in college. This will ruin them. Evelyn looked down at him. She thought of Sarah, the girl in the cell, crying over losing her bakery job. She thought of Terrence, sitting in a cell for playing music too loud. She thought of hundreds of lives this man had ruined without a second thought. Families destroyed because he wanted to feel big. You should have thought about your family, Evelyn said, before you decided to destroy everyone else's. There was a knock at the door. Sharp, authoritative. Enter, Evelyn said. The door opened. It wasn't Rodriguez. It was two men in dark suits with earpieces followed by a uniformed state trooper. The man in the lead suit held up a badge. Judge Frederick Blackwell. The agent said, I'm Special Agent Thomas Hartley, FBI. You are under arrest for racketeering, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and wire fraud. Blackwell looked up, his eyes red and wet. He looked at Evelyn. He was pleading for a lifeline, for professional courtesy, for mercy. Evelyn didn't look away. She didn't smile. She just watched. Stand up, Frederick, Evelyn said. It's time to face the music. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. If justice gives you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Asterisk, asterisk, news travels fast in a small town like Clearwater Valley, but scandal travels at the speed of light. By the time the FBI agents hauled Judge Blackwell out of his chambers, the courthouse lobby was buzzing. Lawyers, clerks, and citizens waiting for their hearings had sensed something was wrong. The usual rhythm of the courthouse, the boredom, the callousness, had been broken by the arrival of the black SUVs outside. Evelyn walked out of the chambers first. She was still wearing her hoodie and sweatpants, but the way she walked, head high, strides purposeful, made the outfit look like battle armor. Behind her, Blackwell was in handcuffs. He had tried to put a suit jacket on to hide them, but Agent Hartley hadn't allowed it. He was in his shirt sleeves, the sweat stains visible under his arms. He wasn't bellowing now. He wasn't banging a gavel. He was looking at his shoes, shrinking into himself. They had to walk through the main rotunda to get to the exit. The crowd went silent. Patricia, the clerk, who had rolled her eyes at everyone earlier, stood with her hand over her mouth. Rodriguez, the bullied bailiff, was pressed against a pillar, trying to make himself invisible. Evelyn stopped in the center of the rotunda. The agents paused, respecting her unspoken command. She turned to face the room. There were about 50 people there. Lawyers who had been complicit in their silence. Defendants who had been terrified. Families waiting for bad news. Can I have everyone's attention? Evelyn said. Her voice didn't need a microphone this time. It rang off the marble walls. The silence was absolute. My name is Justice Evelyn Montgomery of the United States Supreme Court, she announced. A collective gasp rippled through the room. People pulled out their phones. The cameras started recording. For too long, Evelyn continued, gesturing to a man in handcuffs behind her. This building has been a place of fear. The man you called your honor has dishonored this institution. He has sold your rights for profit. He has mocked the weak to please the strong. Today that ends. She looked directly at the row of defense attorneys, the regulars who played golf with Blackwell, to the officers of the court who stood by and laughed while the law was trampled. Evelyn said, her eyes burning into Douglas Winters. Do not think you are safe. An audit is coming. If you were part of the corruption, we will find you. If you stayed silent to protect your paycheck, you are unfit to practice law. Winters looked like he was about to vomit. He loosened his tie, looking for an exit, but the doors were blocked by state troopers. Then Evelyn turned her attention to the bench where the family sat. She saw the mother of the girl with the parking ticket. She saw the young man who had been confused about where to stand. To the citizens of Clearwater Valley, Evelyn said, her voice softening into warmth. This is your courthouse. It belongs to you, not to the judges, not to the lawyers, and certainly not to the politicians. When the law is broken by those sworn to uphold it, it is not a mistake. It is a crime, and today we are prosecuting that crime. She turned back to Agent Hartley. Take him away. The agents nudged Blackwell forward. As he passed the crowd, someone started a slow clap. It was the young woman who had been fined for the parking ticket. Then another person joined in. then another. Soon the entire lobby was erupting in applause. It wasn't a celebration of cruelty. It was the sound of relief. It was the sound of a heavy boot being lifted off their necks. Blackwell was shoved through the glass doors, the flash of press cameras outside blinding him. The local news had arrived. He would be the lead story, the humiliated face of corruption. Evelyn didn't follow him out. She had one more piece of business. She turned to Rodriguez. "Deputy," she said. Rodriguez jumped. Yes, Justice. I believe you have someone in the holding cell, a young woman named Sarah and another woman who goes by Mama." "Ah, yes. I'll get them right away." "Bring them here," Evelyn said, "and bring their paperwork." 10 minutes later, Sarah and the older woman were brought up. They looked confused, blinking in the bright light of the lobby. They saw the crowd. They saw the police. And then they saw the old lady in the Ocean City hoodie, standing in the center of it all like a queen. Sarah ran over, her eyes wide. "Evelyn, what? What happened?" "I heard clapping." Evelyn smiled. "The judge had to leave early, Sarah." A sudden change in career. She took the paperwork from Rodriguez's shaking hands. She glanced at it, then ripped it in half. "You're free to go," Evelyn said. "But the bail," Sarah stammered. "There is no bail. The charges were predicated on an unlawful order from a corrupt official. I have vacated them." Evelyn looked at Rodriguez. "Isn't that right, Deputy?" "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely," Rodriguez agreed quickly. The tough woman, Mama, looked at Evelyn with a mix of shock and respect. "You weren't joking," she said. "You really are the hard karma." "Karma has no deadline," Evelyn said. "But sometimes I like to expedite the shipping." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. She handed it to Sarah. "Sarah, this is a number for my scholarship fund. We help young women who have been unfairly impacted by the legal system get back into school. You call that number on Monday. You tell them Justice Montgomery sent you. You aren't going to work at that bakery forever. You're going to college." Sarah burst into tears, hugging Evelyn tightly. Evelyn patted her back, her eyes looking over the girl's shoulder at the empty bench where Blackwell used to sit. The cleaning crew was already there, sweeping up the floor. They were sweeping away the dirt, but Evelyn knew the real filth had already been taken out in handcuffs. She walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air felt cleaner. The humidity felt less oppressive. As she descended the stairs, a sleek black sedan pulled up. A young man in a suit got out. Her actual clerk from D.C., Jonathan. "Justice Montgomery." Jonathan said, opening the door. "We have a flight back to Washington in 3 hours. The confirmation hearings for the new circuit judges start tomorrow." Evelyn paused, looking back at the Clearwater Valley Courthouse. She pulled the hood of her Ocean City sweatshirt up over her head. "Let them wait, Jonathan," she said, getting into the car. "I think I want to stop and get a cheeseburger first. Justice makes you hungry." While Judge Blackwell was being processed at the very county jail he had filled with innocent people, the shock waves of his arrest were turning the quiet power structures of Clearwater Valley into a disaster zone. Douglas Winters, the defense attorney who had laughed at Evelyn's poor diction just an hour earlier, was currently driving his silver Mercedes at 90 miles per hour down the interstate. He wasn't going home. He was going to his office to shred files. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely keep the wheel steady. The image of the old woman in the hoodie transforming into a Supreme Court justice was burned into his retinas. He knew what audit meant. It meant they would look at the trust accounts. It meant they would see the consulting fees he paid to a shell company registered in Blackwell's wife's name. He screeched into the parking lot of Winters and Associates. He didn't bother locking his car. He ran inside, ignoring his receptionist, Angela. "Mr. Winters?" Angela asked, looking up from her computer. "The mayor is on line 2. He sounds furious." "Tell him I'm dead," Douglas shouted, slamming his office door. He dove for his filing cabinet. He needed the Riverside files. This was a twist that nobody in the courtroom, except perhaps Justice Montgomery, had fully grasped. The zoning violation Evelyn had been fined for wasn't random. The property she claimed to own on Maple Street was the final holdout in a massive land grab scheme orchestrated by Mayor Clinton Grayson and facilitated by Judge Blackwell. They had been condemning properties in the historic black neighborhood of Clearwater Valley, declaring them blighted or citing them for impossible zoning violations, seizing the land and selling it for pennies on the dollar to a private developer to build luxury condos. Douglas found the file. His fingers fumbled with the clasp. He had to burn it. If the feds found this, it wasn't just prison. It was life without parole for RICO conspiracy. He grabbed his metal trash can and a lighter. He threw the papers in. Click, click. The lighter sparked, but didn't catch. "Come on, you piece of junk," he screamed. Suddenly, his office door opened. It wasn't Angela. It was a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a cardboard box. Behind her stood 2 uniformed police officers, not local Clearwater Valley cops, but state troopers. "Mr. Winters," the woman said calmly, "I'm with the State Bar Association's disciplinary committee. We've received an emergency suspension order for your license." Douglas froze, the lighter still in his hand. You can't be here. This is private property." "And that," she pointed to the trash can, "is attempted destruction of evidence. Officers." Douglas dropped the lighter. As the troopers moved in to cuff him, he looked out the window. He saw the Riverside Development billboard across the street. It showed happy, smiling families in a modern utopia. The billboard was peeling, and now so was his life. Across town, Mayor Clinton Grayson was in a different kind of panic. He wasn't running. He was entrenching. Grayson was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that looked like it had been purchased from a catalog. He sat in his office, the blinds drawn, staring at the television. The news was showing footage of Blackwell being shoved into the FBI SUV. "Idiot," Grayson muttered, pouring himself a scotch. "Careless, arrogant idiot." He picked up his phone and dialed the chief of police, a man named Chief Morrison. "Morrison," Grayson barked, "tell me we have containment. Tell me Blackwell is keeping his mouth shut." "I don't know, Mr. Mayor." Morrison's voice sounded tiny and distant. "The feds have him in isolation. They aren't letting my guys near him. And, sir, there's a rumor." "What rumor?" "They say Justice Montgomery didn't just bring the FBI. They say she brought a forensic accountant from the IRS." Grayson felt the blood drain from his face. The IRS? The FBI looked for crimes. The IRS looked for money. And the money trail led straight to Grayson's re-election fund. "Listen to me," Grayson hissed. "You go down to the evidence locker. The hard drive from the city planning office. The one we seized from the inspector last year. I need it to disappear. Flooding, electrical fire. I don't care. Just make it gone." I can't do that, Mayor." "What do you mean you can't? I sign your checks." "Turn on the news, sir. Channel 7. Grayson grabbed the remote. He flipped the channel. The screen showed a live feed from outside a diner called Rose's Kitchen. There was a crowd of people cheering, and sitting in the window booth eating a cheeseburger was Evelyn Montgomery. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Terrence Williams, her nephew, who had just been released. And sitting next to Terrence was a man Grayson recognized with a jolt of terror. It was Leonard Pierce, the former city planner, the man Grayson had fired and silenced 3 years ago because he refused to sign off on the corrupt zoning maps. The reporter on the screen was breathless. "We are receiving reports that Justice Montgomery is currently conducting an informal debriefing with Leonard Pierce, the whistleblower who claims to have proof of a massive embezzlement scheme involving City Hall." Grayson dropped the phone. The glass of scotch slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. She hadn't just come for the judge. She had come for the whole kingdom. Are you feeling the power of justice? Make sure you like this video and subscribed. Drop a comment below about what you think should happen to these corrupt officials. Asterisk, asterisk, inside Rose's Kitchen. The mood was electric. The owner, a large woman named Rosa Garcia, had closed the restaurant to the general public, but she kept the coffee flowing for Evelyn and her guests. Evelyn wiped a spot of ketchup from her lip. She looked at Terrence. He looked thinner than she remembered, and there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry, Annie," Terrence said quietly, looking at his hands. "I didn't know you were coming." I didn't want you to see me in that orange jumpsuit. Evelyn reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Terrence, look at me. The shame does not belong to you. The shame belongs to the men who put you there to fill a quota. But I did play the music loud, Terrence said with a half smile. Loud music is a nuisance, Evelyn said firmly. It is not a crime worthy of prison time. They use you, Terrence. They use you and hundreds of others to create a narrative that this neighborhood was dangerous, so they could drive property values down and buy the land cheap. She turned to Leonard Pierce. Leonard was a nervous little man with thick glasses, clutching a heavy binder like a shield. Mr. Pierce, Evelyn said, her voice shifting from aunt to justice. You are safe now. The Federal Witness Protection Program has been notified, although I doubt you'll need it once the indictments drop. Tell me about the mayor. Leonard opened the binder. He pushed his glasses up his nose. Mayor Grayson and Judge Blackwell had a deal, Leonard explained, his voice trembling. Blackwell would impose maximum fines on homeowners in the Maple Street district for minor infractions. Uncut grass, peeling paint, cracked sidewalks. When the homeowners couldn't pay the thousands of dollars in fines, the city would place a lien on the house. And then, Evelyn prompted, then they would foreclose, Leonard said. They'd kick the families out, and the mayor would sell the properties to Riverside Holdings for a fraction of their value. Riverside Holdings is owned by the mayor's brother-in-law. Terrence slammed his fist on the table. They stole our homes. They locked me up so they could steal Grandma's house. That was a plan, Evelyn said, her eyes cold. They thought if they targeted the poor, the marginalized, the people without fancy lawyers, no one would notice. They thought we were invisible. She took a sip of her coffee. They forgot that even the invisible have a voice. And sometimes, she smiled grimly, that voice carries the weight of the Supreme Court. Suddenly, the bell above the diner door jingled. The room went quiet. Mayor Clinton Grayson walked in. He was alone. He looked disheveled. He wasn't wearing his usual perfect suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week, even though the crisis had only started 3 hours ago. Agent Hartley and 2 other FBI agents who had been sitting at the counter eating pie stood up immediately, hands hovering near their holsters. Sit down, Agent, Evelyn said calmly, not looking away from her burger. Let the mayor speak. Grayson walked to the table. He looked at Leonard Pierce, who shrank back. He looked at Terrence, and then he looked at Evelyn. Justice Montgomery, Grayson said. His voice was raspy. We need to talk. I am eating, Mr. Mayor, Evelyn said, and I generally don't converse with unindicted co-conspirators during my lunch. You don't understand, Grayson pleaded. Blackwell, he went rogue. I had no idea about the harsh sentences. I'm a victim of his deception, too. I came here to pledge my full cooperation. Evelyn slowly set down her burger. She picked up a napkin and dabbed her mouth. She turned to face him. The glare she gave him was enough to peel the paint off the walls. Mr. Mayor, she said, do you know what federal conspiracy carries as a sentence? It's not 30 days. It's 20 years. I didn't, Leonard, Evelyn said, gesturing to binder. Show him page 67. Leonard Pierce shakily opened the binder and turned around. It was a photocopy of an email from Mayor Clinton Grayson to Judge Frederick Blackwell. Subject, Maple Street problem, body. Ramp up the fines. We need the Montgomery lot by December. If the old lady won't sell, condemn it. Make her life hell. Grayson stared at the paper. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. You knew about the fines, Evelyn said softly. You knew about the liens, and you specifically targeted my mother's property because you thought she was just an old lady who wouldn't fight back. Grayson backed away. That's fake. That's forged. It came from your secure server, Agent Hartley said, stepping forward. We just finished a mirror image of your hard drive. We have everything, Mayor. The emails, the bank transfers, the kickbacks. Grayson looked at the door. For a second, he looked like he might run. Don't, Evelyn said. Don't add resisting arrest to the list. Show some dignity, Clinton, for once in your life. Grayson slumped. His shoulders collapsed. The arrogance that had held him up for decades evaporated, leaving only a small, greedy man. Agent Hartley pulled out his handcuffs. "Clinton Grayson, you are under arrest." As they clicked the cuffs onto the mayor's wrists, Terrence stood up. He walked over to the mayor. Grayson flinched, expecting a hit, but Terrence just looked at him. "My name is Terrence Williams," he said. "I'm not a thug. I'm not a statistic. I'm a pre-med student, and I'm the one who's going to watch you go to jail." Grayson looked down, unable to meet the young man's eyes. As the agents led the mayor out of the diner, the crowd outside erupted again. It was deafening. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Evelyn sighed and picked up a French fry. "Well," she said to Leonard, "that takes care of the local government. Now about that developer." She wasn't done yet. The hard karma was just getting warmed up. The federal case against Riverside Holdings moved faster than a summer storm. With the former judge and mayor singing like canaries to reduce their own sentences, the developer, a slick tycoon named Preston Kane, tried to flee to the Cayman Islands. He didn't make it past the tarmac. The FBI grounded his private jet before the engines even warmed up. But the real drama wasn't the arrest. It was the money. Usually when the government seizes assets from criminal enterprise, that money disappears into the black hole of the federal treasury. The victims get a sense of justice, but they rarely get their lives back. The stolen homes were still gone. The equity was still vanished. Evelyn Montgomery, however, didn't play by usual rules. 4 months after the arrest during the asset forfeiture hearing, Evelyn filed an amicus curiae brief, a friend of the court filing. In it, she argued a novel legal theory she called restorative justice via community constructive trust. She argued that since the $58 million in Kane's accounts were extracted directly from the stolen equity of the Maple Street homeowners, the money shouldn't go to the government. It should go back to the people it was stolen from. The courtroom was packed. The new presiding official, Judge Hendricks, a stern but fair woman whom Evelyn had mentored years ago, read the brief in silence. The air was thick with tension. Government prosecutors wanted the money. The banks wanted the money. Judge Hendricks looked up over her glasses. She looked at the gallery filled with families who had been evicted, including the young girl Sarah. Then she looked at Evelyn, who sat quietly in the back row, knitting a scarf. "The court finds the logic of Justice Montgomery irrefutable," Judge Hendricks ruled, slamming her gavel. "The assets of Riverside Holdings are hereby placed in a trust for the immediate reconstruction of the Maple Street District. The government will not take a dime until every homeowner is made whole." The courtroom erupted. It wasn't just a legal win. It was a transfer of wealth that Clearwater Valley had never seen before. The hard karma wasn't just punishing the wicked. It was funding the righteous. The bad guys didn't just lose. They were forced to pay for the rebuilding of the very neighborhood they tried to destroy. 1 year later, the Clearwater Valley County Courthouse looked the same on the outside, but inside the ghosts had been cleared out. In the state penitentiary, 3 counties over, former Judge Frederick Blackwell was no longer your honor. He was inmate 12,584. His days of lounging in leather chairs were over. He now spent his mornings working in the prison laundry, scrubbing the stains out of other men's uniforms, a poetic irony that wasn't lost on anyone. He had tried to appeal his 22-year sentence, but the appellate court, citing the overwhelming evidence preserved by Justice Montgomery, denied his request in a single sentence. Back in Clearwater Valley, the empty lot on Maple Street, where Evelyn's mother's shed once stood, had been transformed. It wasn't a luxury condo. It was the Montgomery Community Legal Center. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Evelyn stood in front of the new brick building. Beside her was Terrence, now finishing his first year pre-med with a 4.0 GPA. Sarah, the girl from the cell, was there, too. She was working as the center's receptionist while attending paralegal classes at night. "You did all this, Annie," Terrence said, adjusting his glasses. "You took down the whole system." Evelyn smiled, watching a group of children playing safely on the sidewalk across the street, a street that no longer had a blighted designation. "I didn't take it down, Terrence," Evelyn corrected him gently. "I just reminded them that the sword of justice cuts both ways. They thought they were the kings of this town. They forgot that even kings have to answer to the law. She looked at the bronze plaque by the door. It didn't have her name on it. It had the names of the families who had reclaimed their homes. "Come on," Evelyn said, turning back to her car. "I have a session in Washington on Monday, and I hear there's a new judge in Clearwater Valley I need to keep an eye on." "Is he corrupt?" Sarah asked, worried. Evelyn laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "No, he's terrified. And that's exactly how a judge should be. Terrified of getting it wrong." As the sun set over Clearwater Valley, the shadows didn't feel menacing anymore. The town had learned the hardest lesson of all. You can judge a book by its cover, but if you judge a Supreme Court justice by her hoodie, you're going to get burned. And that is how Justice Evelyn Montgomery proved that true power doesn't need a robe or a gavel. It just needs the truth. Judge Blackwell thought he was destroying a helpless old woman, but he ended up destroying his own corrupt empire. It's a powerful reminder that we should never underestimate someone based on how they look, and that karma, when served correctly, is the most satisfying verdict of all. What would you have done if you were in Evelyn's shoes? Would you have revealed your identity right away? Or would you have waited to trap him like she did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story of hard karma and ultimate justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have plenty more tales of revenge, justice, and drama coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.